Welcome to In Presence We Trust, a podcast about the art and heart of holding group transformational spaces. I'm Rachel Rickards, founder of the Field Facilitator Training. This podcast is here to empower facilitators, leaders, and individuals from all walks of life to harness the transformative power of presence in their work and personal lives. In Presence We Trust is a sanctuary for aspiring and experienced facilitators alike seeking to evolve their facilitation craft and embodied leadership. In each episode, I will be harvesting insights from leading edge facilitators doing transformational work in fields like relationships, embodiment, therapy, intimacy, and education. In this first episode, I'm honored and extremely touched to start out with my beloved mentor, David Cates. David brings almost 50 years of experience teaching intimacy, sex, and trauma resolution. He invented a practice called Belly to Belly, which allows couples and strangers who have never even met to experience trust and loving connection together. In this conversation you're about to hear, David will be talking about creating safety in areas like sexuality and intimacy to help face fear and trauma. He will speak on death and dying, which has brought depth and fearlessness to his group containers. And finally, he will share more about how moving through grief and cultivating gratitude can support us to keep our hearts open. If you're ready to begin, join me in taking a deep breath. So welcome to this first podcast episode. And I couldn't imagine a better or more appropriate way for me to begin this new adventure than to be joined by David Cates. David Cates, just a little bit about my relationship to David Cates and this podcast and the whole passion and enthusiasm and energy behind who I am as a professional right now and a facilitator can be blamed. And also David is responsible. We'll say that. Before I met David Cates, I think I was still preferring to be in the background. You know, my career was in event production. I was the behind the scenes creatrix, making it all happen. And I spent a lengthy amount of time in Bali, just magically, mystically, had no idea who David Cates was, other than that he was the couples therapist for some of my friends, but ended up in, I think, what is one of the greatest teaching experiments that you took yourself on, or at least invited people into. And we created a kula in Bali where basically a group of 15 of us just said, okay, David, we're yours. Like, take us. We're going to go. We trust you, and we're going to go wherever you take us. And it's still this very romantic moment of time for me that I don't know anyone else who has ever had some experience like this, where you just are in complete devotion to a teacher and give yourself. And that's what we did. And it was through that experience that David breathed this, like, the best way to call it is a lineage, breathed this lineage of love into my soul and kind of sparked me with something that I would have never dreamed of or created for myself in any thought or artificial or way. It happened. It was, this is you. It's life is coming through you, and this is what's next. And so the way that David facilitates, what David facilitates, how David facilitates, and the mirror of that to the way that he lives his life through love is what kind of awakened me into this path. And it's been a continual love affair ever since. You're in every sense a mentor and a teacher and a father figure and a best friend and a spiritual ally. Like, you're all of these things for me that are, just so, I feel so humbled and grateful and lucky to have a David in my life. So I love introducing you to people because I love to, it feels like I get to give the world a gift every time someone new meets you and feels the bigness of your love and the way that you want to serve and what you have to offer. And so thank you for being my first interview here. And I'm so touched always to be in your presence.
Thank you so much. It's still hard for me to hear all that and take all that in because I'm just being me and inviting people to play, inviting people to enter the world that I experience. And I remember one time telling someone that the reason I do that is because I want playmates and peers. I want people who can see the world the way I see it and love the world the way I love it and move in the world in a way that I can relate to. Because a lot of the way people move in the world makes no sense to me at all. So I'm always grateful when someone's willing to take a step into the unknown and the mystery together. So thanks for being in that with me, being in this with me right now. And I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad I love what you're doing in the world. And I'm glad that you're starting a podcast, even though I don't quite understand how you have time with everything else that you're doing. But I'm very curious to see and hear more of what you'll draw out of the world and other facilitators and teachers and bring this medicine to the people who want to explore it more deeply. So I'm glad you're doing this and I'm glad I can be a part of it. I'm entering your work.
Yes. But this is so much, it's so beautiful because we're starting out and it's so much the premise of what I'm trying to communicate here, and which is like each facilitator has a gift for, to say, reality creation. I'm creating a reality in the world and I'm inviting people into my reality. And the resonance that the participant has with that reality determines like, it is the success or it is the creation of those different tribes or communities, because we feel where it's like, oh, but this world, like that world, it's okay. But this world, and it's an invitation into a new world. And that is what is so fascinating and exciting to me, which is my own journey and exploration through this medium, which is like, what are all the realities out there? It's like I get to be a starship explorer and jump to different planets and dive into the different realities that facilitators are creating, and to hear and learn more about what's happening there, which is all various flavors of magic. And so I'd love for this exploration today to just be like, I would love to investigate or even open up a little taste of that reality for people to understand who you are and what that magic is and how that came to be. And, you know, as you've entered into this 70th year of your life this year, which I think is just it's such a incredible turning point. And like, for the eldership that you continue, as I witness you over the last 10 years, the eldership that you continue to claim and set a new precedence for, of like, this is what it can look like to be 70. I would love to hear a little bit about when your journey started out as a facilitator and what that reality creation was, what that space you were hoping to open up for people was or is, and how what that looks like compared to today. What is the space that you're feeling so passionate about opening up that it still makes it worth stepping into this facilitation? Because I know you you've come and gone quite a lot, and yet you're coming back. And like, what is that new breath, that new moment that says yes? And this is what I want to invite you into.
Ooh. Someday you will get to understand what it's like when someone invites you to encapsulate. At this point, it would be like 55 years, because I was 16 years old when I first started facilitating. I was very lucky, very fortunate to be dropped into a situation when I was in high school where when was this? Back in 1970, 1969, 19, and I was in the Midwest. I was raised in St. Louis. And there was a beautiful church that I didn't even go to that was just in the neighborhood. And they had an extra house. And they were concerned about all the things that were happening to young people. At that time, there was a lot of runaways, and there was the draft for Vietnam, and kids were doing drugs, and all kinds of stuff was going on. And the parents were freaking out, and they didn't know what to do about it. And this church offered us, we were a collection of kids, really. They offered us this house as a place to hang out in if we would let some of their adults hang out with us and kind of get to know us and what the world that we were living in and what was important to us, and kind of like meet us in our world. And so I began then as a bridge or a facilitator. And I was the one who ended up being the translator who took what was going on with the kids and kind of like taught the adults what it was and what it looked like to them, but what it was like from the inside for the kids who were doing these experiments and saying no to the culture that they were given, that they inherited. And so that was my first dive into facilitation. And it's just been going on ever since then. There always seems to be communities along the way that gather together around, I can't even say specific inquiries, but communities of people who are interested in some kind of mystery that they can't quite solve. And so coming together to work it out together. And by doing all this, I've become very aware of group intelligence and group heart and what happens when a number of people focus their energy and intention and passion together on particular projects, particular questions. And what comes through the group is always wiser and more fun and bigger than anything that comes through any individual person. So that's kind of like what got me started with group work. I don't know, I could call it facilitation, but at that point it was more group experimentation.
It doesn't matter how long I've known you. I'm still like, you have such a wealth of stories that I still get to learn new things. I didn't ever know that this was the first introduction. I thought it started more in your San Francisco days. So I'm I'm not surprised to hear you were initiated much younger, and not surprised to hear also this way where you're translating from children to adult, because that still seems to be, to me, something that you're so gifted at, is being this bridge between these worlds of animal and child and spirit and adult. And it happened from the beginning.
It happened from the beginning. Yes. And
Yeah.
Even though shamanism is a delicate word these days, there's something about that I deeply feel and can claim for myself, as I see some of what a shaman does is bridge between worlds, and kind of like, in some sense, be multilingual and be able to speak with the plants and the animals and the ancestors and the spirit of the place and the rivers, and bridge that back to the tribe. And I feel like that's one of the things I love the most to do. And like you're saying, speaking for children, speaking with children, bridging that conversation back and forth, it's just become over the years the height of my career as a facilitator and a teacher. I feel like so much of what I was doing was speaking to and for the inner child in each person, like the part that didn't have a voice or was having flooded with emotional sensory experiences that they didn't understand. And so how can we learn to connect with our own inner child and with each other's innocence and come into a deeper communion and safety together by including all of us, all the dimensions.
And that is one of your biggest, most incredibly, it's like one of your gifts that's almost unteachable. It's like you are a living embodiment of that. And I'm curious, like, when did that come in your journey? Like, when did that land in you where you felt like, I have this, or you realized or recognized for yourself that it was your own gift?
Probably that also happened in the high school era when
Wow.
I was the kid who didn't fit into any of the cliques or any of the groups, but I had friends in all of them. So already then I was bridging to the football people and the cheerleaders and the nerds and the artists and the dropouts and the druggies and the teachers' pets and like all that stuff. It was just, I didn't understand why everybody didn't want to get along with everybody and play with everybody and learn and love everybody. It was fascinating to me. Earlier you were using the metaphor of in our spaceship exploring different worlds. To me, every person is a different world, a different universe, and to be able to be given access to that universe is such a rare and precious gift. And for me, the hunger and the drive was always like, I want to know what it's really like in your universe. I don't care about the way you're presenting yourself in order to fit into the crowd or the society or whatever. It's like I kept always wanted to go deeper because these inner universes were the most fascinating part of being alive for me. So when I could do that with people, I did. And when I couldn't, I would go walk in the woods. It's like there's always worlds that are waiting to be explored and shared.
And I'm guessing that this, like something that you also have a unique gift around, but I'm guessing a lot of people who are facilitators do as well, is you're also very gifted in your one-on-one work with individuals and leaders, and the way that you do that, one in like, I don't know, like a coaching context, but also in another context, which is body work. And then similarly, you're incredible at working with couples. And then you also have this work with groups. And I'm just curious, like, how did that all arrive and land that you are this multifaceted guide? Was there like a journey through that, or have you been kind of oscillating back and forth between them? How did it come to be?
I think I'd have to say it was more an oscillation or what was the name of that movie? Everything Everywhere All at Once. It all, whatever arises, like whatever showed up at my doorstep is what I was curious about. And sometimes it was people, individuals. And a lot of my work has been for 30 years, maybe 25 years now. I've been doing a lot of dedicated men's work. And how that might be a better entry point for this question. So I began, I wouldn't say I was coaching so much as mentoring. And there were there were young men. I always seem to get the ones who were in the Saturn return. It's like they'd call up out of nowhere and I go, let me guess, you're 28 years old. Yeah, how did you know? Well, because
Yeah.
you're hitting the rocks right now. So I would begin helping expand the possibilities of what it could be to be a man in today's world. And I'd be working one-on-one with people, and we would discover that part of this is we need brotherhood. We need to be in community. We need to be in groups where we can see there's not one way to be a man. There's, like 1,000 ways to be a man. And, here in this circle, there's 20 men and there's 20 ways. And if we can get past the facades and the surfaces and into the depths of how are people actually experiencing their lives and their work and their relationships and their self-images and getting out of bed in the morning and all this stuff. It's like so beautiful to have multiple imprints, people who are doing it many, many different ways. So you could create a kind of pick and choose. Like, oh, I like the way you're really doing this, and I love the way you're doing this, and I don't know, I don't resonate with that, but like create your own build a man kind of a thing. So the individual mentoring naturally fed into men's groups, community work. And then as men moved through their Saturn return and started to actually become available as men, then there were relationships. And so the people that I was working with would go, oh, like, we're at a really rough spot in the relationship. Would you be willing for, like, if she listened in on our call? And then it would turn into, oh, now I'm bridging between the two of you and translating and kind of getting that. So couples work naturally flowed from that also. Everything's connected to everything else. You pull on one thread and suddenly you're in community and you're in relationship. And now you're an example, parents. Like now these people are having children, and what is it like to be a father or a mother? And how does that impact your inner world and your values and what's important to you? And how do you show up in a new way that you've never had to show up in before? So again, everything's connected to everything else, and I just keep being curious.
And now where you've landed, which you haven't mentioned yet, though, is it's like so beautiful because you're almost like this very beautiful weaver. You're like a spider with this gigantic web, and the journey of your life is just weaving new threads into this incredible mosaic. And now you're at the death thread. And I'm so curious to hear you speak a little bit about how, because you've been on this journey for a while now, and it's been slowly dripping into the group work as well. But I'm curious to just hear a little bit of the passion, the inspiration for you about bringing more of these flavors of death into group work.
Yeah, thanks. It's been, well, the bulk of this particular chapter has been maybe 8-9 years. Began with my mother being in her dying and death journey, and my sister, who also at a very much the same time was in her own dying and death journey. And I was fortunate because of the way the lifestyle that I'm blessed with. I was fortunate to be able to take time out of my life and spend 6 months with each of them as they were going through these processes. And so I know there are many people who work in hospice who are far more knowledgeable and experienced in this than I am. But for me, the opportunity to go on this journey with two people I've known my entire life, like from when I was born, and be able to start out being behind the veil behind the facade. Nobody's pretending, we're not talking medical talk. It's just like, how is this for you that now you can't walk or you can't eat this kind of food, or, you're starting to lose your memory, those kinds of things. And so being with that in a day by day basis and being curious about how is this universe expanding inside of you, I started to really see how death was not what we think it is. And the ways in which we see just the surface of death rather than diving into the heart of it, I think is part of the problem that we have, why we're so death phobic and we want everybody to be shunted away to a nursing home or a hospital to die away from where life is happening. And I found that it's such a beautiful process to be with, because it's ultimately a distillation. Like every day becomes a new meeting the question, what's really important now? Like what's important and what's not important? What can I drop away? What are the things that I thought I couldn't live without that I'm now living without? And so there can be moments of loss and grieving, sure. And then there's also, so as I'm dropping all of these things that I thought were necessary, what remains? What's still here? Like where's, and what's still here is presence and heart. And, the title of your podcast, In Presence We Trust, is Amen. This is what I saw over and over again, is that as all these things drop away, all our roles, all our abilities, all our identities drop away, what remains is this simple, pristine presence. And it's not at all what you might expect. One of the paradoxes with my sister, who for the last 3 years of her life lived on those horrible little bottled and sure whatever vitamin water calorie crap stuff. That's all she could take down because of the cancer and her digestion and everything. And the last 6 months of her life, I spent a lot of time with her sitting on the couch watching TV, and what she was watching was food cooking shows. And she wasn't sad about it. She was just like, oh, this is really interesting. Oh, yeah, I remember that flavor. And oh, I never used to like that kind of, and she was just like in it. And I would never have guessed, okay, this is someone who hasn't eaten solid food for 3 years. To me, it'd be like, how would you torture her? You'd play cooking shows and make her look at all of this juicy, delicious food that she can't eat and she can't taste. But there was like a childlike simplicity of just being with it, being with the loss and being with the memory that was very much part of her passage. And I got to be in that with her.
Mm. Mm. It's so painful and so beautiful simultaneously.
I find that's the mix.
Yeah.
Painful and beautiful.
Beauty and pain.
Beauty and pain, the dying and death process, yes. And love. Love. Because ultimately, as all the other things drop away, all that matters is the love.
Yeah. And so like taking that death journey that you really like death doula, you were a death doula for both your mother and your sister, and I think for various other people's as well. And then like how in you is that process of like I'm so fascinated by, there is a personal experience in the world that you're deeply embedded in, and then there's a process of integration and then translation, where you then, this becomes a part of, as it lands in your personal heart and personal being, there's a translation that happens as this work now starts to melt and get incorporated into how you hold space and the reality that you invite people into. And I would be so curious if there's any words that you could put on that process as it happens through you.
Great question. I think when you were saying that, like, what came to mind was fearlessness. Like, I'm not afraid of death. And so ultimately that's what blocks people, like all the group work that we've done, all the healing work, all the relation work, all the sexual work, it all comes to safety and like people not wanting to be destroyed, not wanting to go beyond their capacity to hold it together. And so in the group work for many years, what we've learned is like taking a step past that point is where the magic happens and the healing happens. It's like, so yes, you've been this way your whole life. And now in this group of people right here, we're present with you and we're inviting you to not do that, not be that way, not have that thought, and take a step into what you're most terrified of taking a step into. Just one step, and we'll just be here with you, and we'll hold you and love you and see you and feel you as you take that step. And it'll be scary, and if it's too much, you can come back. But like, this is what we're doing together. And so in the group work now, in your very honorific introduction to me, you forgot one of the things, my reputation that I'm known for so many years now is safety. Like, I'm the guy who can do sexual healing work one-on-one and in groups who is safe. And so I've been cultivating that inquiry, like what creates safety and how can I be absolutely solid and safe when someone is going into their trauma and their fear and the unknown and bringing their body in with them. And now, as I've gone through the death and dying process, I'm absolutely fearless. It's like, you don't even need safety. Like, I've seen these people who are dying don't have any safety. They don't get to take one step in and then go, oh, this was too scary. I need to come back to what I know. It just keeps going and going and going. And it goes to a place that is beyond beautiful. Like hearts broken open, lives broken open, and something incredibly beautiful coming through. And so in my facilitation work now, there's more and more of a kind of, people are saying, oh, you're bringing out your sword now. And I feel like, yeah, I'm not just creating the safety, I'm also creating the challenge and the push. And the like, yes, you're scared, but it's like you're walking the plank, keep going. And you think you're going to fall in and the sharks are going to eat you, but they're not. And you're going to fall and it's going to be scary. And so there's just, I'm sure, I'm confident that if we keep going, something amazing will happen. Because we are so much more than all of our fears and defenses. And when we move into this freshness, this unknown mystery and presence, we become so strong and clear and lovable and loving. And this is a space this is a universe that I want to invite people into now. Like, even further, keep going.
And that universe, like, how would you name it, or what would be two sentences, or like, what is that space that you're inviting people to?
I'm inviting people into being willing to die, into being willing to die to the self that they think they are, the limits that they think they have, the life that they think they have to live. I'm inviting people to die to all that and to walk into the present moment naked and unafraid and unashamed and curious.
Mm, mm, mm. I'm sitting at this crossroads right now, and I have another curiosity, and this all intertwines. But there was we haven't spoken about this exactly yet, and we've left it out. I think that there is this piece of the safety, and we're just going to park the safety man for a minute. But I think another big aspect of who you have been as a mentor and as a facilitator has had to do with sexuality. And I'm guessing a lot of that safety a lot of who you are as that safe idol or safe beacon for people came from your work with sexuality. And then thus there was this, your work with intimacy and relationship, and now it's bridging into death. So I'm so curious around, like you say, now I'm inviting people to die. And I'm curious, like, there's some way I'm curious about that journey of the death. When you were working with sexuality, were you also inviting people to die? And when you're working with intimacy, like the belly to belly practice, is there also a death in that? I'm curious to weave some of these threads together, from the sexuality work to the intimacy and relating, and now into death. What do all of those meeting points have in common? What is the
Mm-hmm.
through line through all
Mm-hmm.
of those different eras of work?
Well, yeah, you nailed it. Definitely, safety as an issue arose from the sexuality work and the sexual healing work. And uh, in order to open into something new, people had to face their fear. And in order to face their fear, to take a long, long detour around the side through trauma recovery work and the role of the brain and the central nervous system and how the body responds to trauma and how to bring it out of trauma. And one of the things that I learned in that decades long journey into safety is that in order to take new steps out of trauma, we need to be relaxed and feel safe first in order to do it. And I come from, in my 20s, a lot of the work that I was experiencing, the groups and workshops and things that I was going to, were super challenging. Like it was very like bang, 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 like pushing people past their edge. And there are breakthroughs that happen for sure. And some people are ready for that. And some people, like, it just re-traumatized them. And I could see that happening in the room. So there had to be a balance of, how does the central nervous system work, and how do we get the parasympathetic going, and how do we create like enough safety and presence in the body in order to digest this new old material that we're willing to look at for the first time. And
Mm.
so the whole thing about safety became crucial. And now what I see is that too many people have become too numb and too complacent, and creating safety for them, it's like the baby doesn't need another pacifier and another swaddling cloth. The baby needs to like get up and walk out into the dirt with her own bare feet and have a new experience. And so there's ways in which this gets a little, this is territory, the kind of stuff I don't like to talk about in public. So here you are recording. Okay. Yes, I know you love this part. So you as a parent now will know there are things that Lilith doesn't want to do because she's scared, that she doesn't want to do because she's stubborn, that she doesn't want to do because she's rebellious. There's all these reasons. And for me, it's with children that I learned that what is safety really? It's like, if I'm the parent, I can determine that Lilith can walk out into the backyard and be barefoot on the grass, and something unpleasant might happen. She might step on a bee. She might fall down or something, but none of it is life-threatening. So there's levels of safety, and there's ways in which, as facilitators, as parents, and the tie-in between those two, the relationship between those two is sometimes you don't have to feel safe to take a step if I'm back here and I'm really watching and I really know you're going to be safe. So I can encourage you to go past your limits in a different way, in a more challenging way, in a more like, sorry, Lilith, you can kick and scream. I'm picking you up and I'm putting you down in the backyard right now. This is the new reality that we're experiencing right now. And you can be scared and you can be mad and you can scream and cry and all. And I know that eventually you'll blow through all that and you'll start getting curious about this new world that you're in. And that's like, I'm taking that as a metaphor for what I'm doing in facilitation groups now. It's like, I'm watching because I am trauma informed, because I can see the signs and I can more accurately assess who's ready to do which steps. So this is not any different from when you're working with children and you see, oh, this child is ready to walk and this child is ready to crawl and this child is ready to be held. Like, what are the needs? And this is like forbidden right now, that, like, I'm taking responsibility for you and I'm being an adult to your child. And, there's ways to facilitate that are more gentle and invitational. Like, I invite you to try this, just, take a breath and see what happens. And that's the kind of facilitation that I've done for 20 years. And now I'm moving into a different thing for reasons of urgency that we'll get into in a little bit here. But I'm getting into a different thing where we don't have the luxury of the time to keep going so slow and being so safe for everyone. We need to push a little bit. It's like we're running out of a burning building. You can be mad and it doesn't feel good to you. And I'm watching the bigger picture, that there's a fire happening and we need to get you out into a different world. And that's the real safety. And whether you know it or not doesn't matter, because you will come to know it. And there's a bossiness. Yes, there's a leadership. There's a sword. There's a push that happens now for me that didn't happen before. And I'm glad it's here. And it's scary as a leader to put myself out there in ways that, I have a part of myself that's always self-conscious, self-aware, watching myself and feeling like, oh boy, and I can hear the judgments coming at me. Who the hell does he think he is? And, the old white man is doing this and he's pushing her too hard and blah, 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 all that stuff. And there's something happening with leadership now where we can't just follow the least common denominator or the most broken link. We need to push through into something different.
This is beautiful. I think this is an incredible segue. Didn't expect to get here, but I was hoping or imagining we might. And this call that's coming through you, I haven't felt in you the way that I feel it now. The passion, the dedication, the devotion, the urgency around this gift that you want to seed or implant or pass on to the leaders, the community builders, the other facilitators. And I would love to invite you and to give you the space to speak more into this. And it has to do with a new kind of like a new almost, it feels like a new body of work that is, again, it's the sum of the parts and the evolution of all of your work thus far, which is this, facing collapse. And even just this phrase, when I have really sat and been really kind of almost meditating and feeling into this phrase and what's being called through you, is like to turn towards, to really like allow ourselves. And it's so much this death doula work, to not pretend anymore that death isn't happening. And in the same way, to not pretend anymore that collapse isn't happening. And so I would love to hear, it's like this new reality that you're inviting us into, this new space that you're opening up, and this work that is coming through that feels like, even as a 70-year-old man in his eldership, like I just bow in reverence to that call that is deepening and actualizing through you. And I would just love to hear a little bit more of that, like that, the passion behind this, not just drifting away into retirement, but actually taking this next push to say matters. And I want you to show up for this. And this is why, like, I would just love to invite that sword in right now and to hear a little bit about that from you.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like if I summarized the work that I've done for 60 years, I would say you could really fit it into the category of personal healing work and relationship healing work and community healing work. And all of it happened on a very small scale. And it happened in a world that is rapidly dying. So, what we used to call it, these are leisure activities. They're what you do when you're privileged and you have time and space to go on a retreat for 2 weeks and, fluff up your marriage or like be initiated into manhood or whatever it is. That when there's a steady state in the world where like you can go away for 2 weeks and the world you come back to, it'll be the same. Your house will still be there. Your kids will still be there. Your job will still be there, that kind of a thing. And what I'm seeing now through the long lens of 70 years is that static world, that predictable world is no longer here. And there are people who have different degrees of numbness or denial about how rapidly things are changing. But what I see is they're changing exponentially rapidly. And so the kinds of efforts that we were able to put into our personal healing journeys and our, like our one-on-one relationships and things like that, it's like, that doesn't matter if the boat is sinking. So the invitation right now, the call is to turn our focus off of the sort of navel gazing or like, let's make my personal life better, turn it completely inside out to, oh my God, what's going on in the world and what can we do about this? How can I participate in this? And I've come to a space where I don't know what you should do. I don't know if you should start a campaign to clean up the beaches and save the whales, or if you should make crypto be the new global currency, or create more social justice, or feed the hungry, or stop the wars, or whatever, or just go plant a garden, or buy a place in the woods where your family and friends can go to escape from the chaos and the madness. I don't know what the action is. I just am calling for us to stop looking inward for a moment and turn our focus out to the world. And all of us, as teachers and leaders and facilitators and workshop participants, and people who have been in therapy for 5 years, and people who get to go to all these events and read these books and listen to these podcasts, it's like we have skills that we've developed. We have insights and awareness about how to become more present, how to become more true to ourselves, more loving in the world. And I would like to see these tools not be focused in such self-centered ways, but turned inside out and look at the world around you and the community around you. Look at your extended family. Look at the statistics are appalling. I'm in the men's work. 25% of the men in the United States don't have a close personal friend. They don't have anyone to talk to about whether they should go for this surgery or take this new job. They're completely alone in that. Like, that's one thing. All these children all around the world who are literally starving from hunger, all the stuff, we can go on and on. There's many, many things to notice that are going on in the world. And my job at the moment is just to say, hey, we've been so fortunate to be fed in all these ways, with money, with food, with wisdom, with connection. And let's put it to use. Let's put it to some kind of service at something bigger than ourselves, and see where it goes. So for me, it's just a turning of presence away from the inner to the outer.
I love this phrase that you said just now, turn it inside out. Like this is really sticking with me as I don't know, it almost lands in an embodied way in my being, to like, from the navel gazingness of where we've been, to actually start to open the eyes and see out, and allow the outside to now penetrate in, and allow that inner wisdom, that inner knowledge, that inner presence to shine back out onto the world that desperately needs it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Beautiful summary. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just becoming awake, more available, more present with something bigger. And, for me personally, it's like, we'll weave this in with the death and dying and everything. It's like death and dying is about getting in touch with how big we really are. Like, as we drop away, as we let go of and drop away all the identities and things that we think we are, we have opportunities to step into bigger and bigger spaces of pure presence, pure love, pure sensation, just becoming vast. And this paying attention to the world is another way of get out of your small self, start to remember how big you are, how powerful you are, how vast the world is, how many universes there are here, and participate in that. Don't be myopic. Don't be self-absorbed. There's something much, much bigger that's happening now, and you're being called to notice and to engage.
It's so good. I have, okay, we're going to round off now because I think we're at this beautiful climax. What gift or resource or tool would you invite people or gift to people who are listening, who come to that place where they're at that choice point of going from this like internal inward focus into like, what can people do on a practical level that aren't coming to workshops right now? Or, you know, someone who's listening, who's like, yes, I want that. I want to make that shift. Something either from your life that you do or something that you would guide participants to do. What can people do to start to bring this home?
Oh, great question. For me, the whole thing, the entry point into the world has always been the body. So, like, my body is my entry point into the world, not my mind. My mind will take me out of the world into virtual worlds and imaginary worlds and self-centered worlds. And my body, taking breaths into my body, feeling more and more of the sensations that are available, that are happening inside my skin, bringing awareness and attention to that, and then letting that expand out. So touching is a great way. So like as I'm breathing and becoming more present with my internal sensations, then I can begin to touch things in the world and connect with them through my senses and begin to play with breathing out into the trees and the sky and breathing that in to me and noticing and appreciating the things that are in my home, that are in my world, and the people that I see, and beginning to create more of a feeling of circulation because my attention is going out and then I'm pulling them back in. I'm receiving them back in. And the breath is such a beautiful tool for making that practical, obvious, like it's happening right now with this breath. I am breathing in the air into my body, and now I'm taking what's in my body and breathing it out into the air. So there's circulation and connection that's starting to happen. And I would say that's the daily, more than daily, hour by hour, moment by moment practice that I'm engaged in is how do I create awareness and circulation with the larger world outside of David, and noticing what needs attention and attending to, you know, that one thing. It's like I don't have to save all the whales. I can just help that one person cross the street. You know, it's whatever shows up in front of me is my next step. And the world is inviting me into something greater. And the other piece that I would add to this is that for me, in order to participate more fully in the world and to become more engaged with the world, I have to move through grief. I have to move through my grief about what's dying, what's ugly, what's unjust, what's not right about the world right now. And I have to be willing to just feel that and be with that and let myself be opened and moved and changed by that. So there's two parts. There's like feeling the grief for what's going, for what's the loss, and feeling the appreciation and the gratitude for the beauty that is here, the beauty that I'm perceiving and the beauty that I'm creating in the world. So both of those, the gratitude and the grief, are what keep my heart opening more and more and more every day.
So beautiful. For anyone who doesn't know, who's listening to this, like what you've just done is quite astounding, because David, you are the creator of the belly to belly practice, which is, I mean, I hope you realize for yourself what a profound gift that practice has been. I still hear even daily of people practicing it in places all over the world and it coming alive. And what you've just described and what the tool that you've given people is basically showcasing the practice of belly to belly is how you live your life. And you basically just found a way to synthesize and bring into practice your living daily reality in a way, like a condensed, consolidated form for people to have that experience that they can then start to ripple out into the world. And so I just want to highlight that here because it's phenomenal. Like it's so rare, those practices that come through and the gift that they are, and the way that they change people's lives and give them a practice that they can start to integrate and make sense of and live is like, and the way that you just described it, it was like, you know, for me as someone who like belly to belly is also such an important practice in my life and my facilitation, to hear you describe it in that way just felt like it hit home. It was like, yeah, that's the creator of that practice.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm just trying to find ways to share the reality that I'm in, share my universe, and invite other people into this shared universe. And, you know, belly to belly is one way. The grieving and the connecting with the world, the being of service is another way. But I just want playmates. I want people to at least have the opportunity to experience how much love and gratitude I feel about the privilege of being alive.
Thank you, David, for all that you are and everything that you continue to gift us with. I could keep going now for hours with you. I have another 10 questions prompting in my mind. And I know that this isn't going to be the only time I interview you. I'm for sure you'll be back many times. So I'm going to save some of that goodness and complete here for now and just say thank you so much for just what you are and how generously you continue to share yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me into your new creation. I love this. Happy launching to the podcast. In presence we trust.
Anything you want to say? In presence we trust. Anything you want to say as a final, if you were going to die tomorrow and you could just say one last thing to the world before you took your last breath, what would it be?
Keep loving. Don't stop. There's more. There's always more love.
Yeah.
I haven't found my final deathbed words yet. Okay.
I love you, David. Thank you so much. Too. Thank you so much, David Cates, and thank you for listening to this first episode of In Presence We Trust. For episode 2, and as a fuller introduction to this podcast, David will be back and we're going to be turning the tables as David will interview me, your host, Rachel Rickards. I'll share my journey from event producer to facilitator and teacher, and I'll be discussing how my exploration of polyamory and self-love totally transformed my understanding of vulnerability and self-awareness in creating safe and transformative group spaces. Check out my website for information on my latest courses. There's a link in the show notes. And a special thank you to all the beings who have contributed to the creation of this podcast: Michelle, Vaishnavi, Joby, Lavinia, and the Soundfields, Thomas and John. Thank you again for joining me as we begin the journey and open up this new communal space and learning environment that is In Presence We Trust. You can subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to like and comment below. Until next time, deep breath.